This is DBrief, brought to you by the Australian Industry Group.
Hello, and welcome to this series of special episodes of AI Group's DBrief podcast. DBrief is designed to give you insights into the impact of policy on your business. In these mini episodes, we'll be talking about the kinds of policies we want to see for our members in the upcoming federal election. My name is Louise McGrath, Head of Industry Development and Policy at AI Group, and today I have Caroline Smith, Executive Director of AI Group's Centre of Education and Training, to talk about her pre-election paper. Welcome, Caroline.
Thanks, Louise.
Caroline, skills is one of those topics that everyone will probably have an opinion on and is certainly something that members constantly claim a shortage on. Before we get to our priorities, what do you see as the critical problem we are trying to address for our members?
Thanks, Louise. Absolutely. If you talk to any AI Group member across the country in any industry sector and ask them about the biggest challenges they face in their business, access to a skilled workforce is always near the top of the list. And I guess it's not that surprising given that at the moment and for a while, the labour market, the unemployment has been hovering around 4%. So, we're basically at full employment. So it really means that attracting and retaining talented workforce, a skilled workforce, is a real challenge for so many businesses.
And your paper does talk about systemic change in all modes of education, as well as a focus on foundational skills. What are the top three priorities that you'd like a new government to start with?
So the issue is to try and fix the skill challenges that we have in Australia. There is no one silver bullet, and anyone who looks at our paper will see that we've got 10 different recommendations. So encourage you to have a look at that. But to really try and to distill it down to some key elements, I'd say three things: a more coherent and connected tertiary education system that's responsive to both employer and learner needs, as well as support for employers and for learners to participate in structured workplace learning. And so that's things like apprenticeships and work integrated learning. And then equipping people so that they've got the skills to learn throughout life. That's really about lifelong learning and also the underpinning foundational skills that people need to be able to do that. Some call that learning to learn skills.
So getting down to that connected system that you mentioned first off, I mean, a lot of people's minds, especially of a certain age and stage, would have a very binary view of what is vet skills and what's tertiary education look like or university education look like. But are you looking at how do we integrate the two, and should people actually be thinking of, different skills for future jobs, and which is the best institution to give them those kinds of skills?
So the skills that we need in our economy now, but also in the future, they're becoming more complex, and skill needs for emerging roles are cutting across traditional occupational boundaries, and they extend both into vocational and into higher education and university systems. And vet and universities, they both have their unique strengths, and they're both critically important to our future, but not in isolation. So we need those two parts of our system to be working together really well and to be working with industry, and very much with industry and learners at the centre.
And how can industry feed into that system? Like, how can they say, well, these are the skills we see, as we develop our business models to address the changing environment? How can they provide that feedback into the system?
In the development of a connected and cohesive tertiary education system, it's really important that any governance structures that come out of that, they actually build in industry into doing that. And so that's sort of at the more strategic and systematic level, system-wide level. But actually as well, we know that a lot of industry already works with, universities to help inform and tailor the learning offer. That's something that vocational education and training, it's absolutely at the heart of what vocational education and training does. industry feeds into the training package system that sets the standards for the training that is delivered. And so that, VET has really been pioneering that for a very long time. And so, we do see across the tertiary system already that, there are some elements where we are seeing the two come together. We do have some dual sector institutions that work really well. And a lot of partnerships that do take place, but we need so much more of it, and we need the frameworks that support the system to actually really encourage that. And so, that's about an Australian qualifications framework that really properly recognises the knowledge, skills, and their application. Universities, but also in the vocational sense. It's about how do we have frameworks in place so that learners can move pretty seamlessly, and that there are those structured avenues for industry to engage, whether that be through work integrated learning and informing design of programs and that type of thing. AI Group does a lot of work in this area. We partner with a range of different institutions to help in informing the offerings, but we can't do all of that on our own, and really we need to be incentivising business to be able to get on board to do that, because it's hard, particularly for smaller businesses.
And thinking about how do we evolve the system for the future? You've recently won an award, haven't you, for the pilot of the higher apprenticeship? Do you want to just give a quick explanation of that?
Yeah, so this is really exciting. Just very recently at the Universities Australia Summit, they held an awards night, and there was a Future Builder Award, which was really about innovation in education. And so what was profiled there was the higher degree in software engineering, which is AI Group, Centre for Education and Training, has been actively involved in. BAE Systems and other employers have sort of been key in that, working with the University of South Australian Skills Commission. So a real sort of partnership approach. And so that is actually Australia's first ever degree apprenticeship. And so it's an apprenticeship, like all others, declared as an apprenticeship by the South Australian Skills Commission. The people coming into the workplace, they are employed, and they're also pursuing their university education. And we are hearing great results coming out of that. And, that's one of a number of examples that we've been involved in, but there's a whole range of others that are blossoming right across the country. And we're really keen to see a more system-wide approach to that.
And I mean, it is still, as you say, leveraging off the apprenticeship model, which is, I guess, almost years old now. So probably could do with a refresh. And apprenticeships have always been a focus for AI Group. More generally, we've got over 300 apprentices that we manage and place in companies across Australia. You mentioned work integrated learning and workplace learning. I guess apprenticeships are part of that. What have we sort of asked the future government to think about there?
So apprenticeships are a really critically important skills pathway for Australia, both in terms of our future pipeline of critical skills, but also for the benefit that they bring to the people who are undertaking them. And we have skill shortages in many roles, and that's often in trades and technician roles. And in fact, our members report that the highest shortage areas that they face are technician and trade roles, and that's certainly something that other data reflects as well. So we need to be not only maintaining but expanding the number of apprentices commencing and also completing their training. And so employers play a really central role in this work-based training pathway. So without an employer to employ an apprentice, there's no apprenticeship. And apprentices, they come in and they're learners, and particularly in the first couple of years, they are less productive. And so incentives for employers and apprentices to participate in the apprenticeship system are really key strategies that governments can take to raise the number of commencements, improve completion rates, but also to recognise the costs that employers incur in employing, training and supervising apprentices. So we've had apprenticeship incentives in place for many years, but in recent years we've seen a lot of change and a fair amount of uncertainty. And that certainty is really, really important for businesses. They plan their workforce needs and how they're going to fill those gaps. So our view is that commencement incentives should be provided to employers across all industries, regardless of size, but with additional incentives for employers to attract and retain apprentices in priority sector and skill shortage occupations.
And how would we prioritise those particular skills? I mean, how do we make that judgment? Because I'm sure everyone thinks their particular skill category is very important. How do we make that judgment on behalf of Australia?
Look, it's definitely a judgment call, I think. And, there are lots of approaches that have been in place over the years. Priority skills lists is sort of the current approach to doing that. There's talk about different ways of doing it. But our view is that structured workplace-based training is a good thing and to be encouraged sort of for all sectors because, actually both doing the study but also getting access to work and for those two things to be hand in hand is a good thing, and it's a great outcome. In fact, my own background was a traineeship. It was a great entry into work in the first instance and an opportunity to earn and learn. And and prior to me entering the workforce, those kind of opportunities weren't available in all sectors. And so that's why we do see value across the board in that structured workplace training. But, certainly we see the value in prioritising, particularly where there are skill shortages that are for now and into the future. And it's really important to have some stability in those settings as well, because it actually takes a long time to train in a lot of skilled occupations. And so you can't just, switch year in, year out. You need to actually give business some certainty, and we need to be expanding the availability of places and also doing things to increase completions as well.
And you also mentioned, I guess, a modern version of that workplace learning, which is work integrated learning, which I guess covers all sorts of skill sets. Perhaps explain what that means for people who don't know, and then what have we asked for in particular?
So work integrated learning is, if you think on the one hand, an apprentice is someone who is employed. So work integrated learning is about someone who is a learner and they're a student, and we're particularly focusing on university students because we hear often from employers that students don't necessarily have some of the application or the practical experience, and so work integrated learning is a structured way that the university students can actually get some of that initial experience either through a formal sort of workplace placement. There are even other models within work integrated learning that are much shorter and sharper. But we have at the centre have been involved in work integrated learning over a number of years, and we know that there's a number of things that are really important to making those initiatives successful, and that includes partnership working. You need those relationships to really, develop trust between the parties and to, to collaborate and to work together. And we see lots of great examples. So companies sort of need to see the value to their business. And again, we've seen some amazing examples where, including through some projects that we've run where students have come into the workplace. It's been a great introduction for them. And often there's an ongoing connection to that company or another company in the sector. So it's it's getting that opportunity to, have some of that practical application of their university learning in a workplace setting. But it's not always easy to get that kind of thing set up. And so partly that's, as I said, about, the relationships and finding the way in, but actually, because, it's costly as well for industry to do that. It's, supervision time. It's, putting that effort into making sure that experience for the student is a good one, and they're only there for a short amount of time, in the scheme of things. So we think that it's important that industry is incentivised to participate in work integrated learning. That's particularly the case for the smaller employers.
I think it can be, though, mutually beneficial, as you say. I was once involved taking a lot of companies to Latin America, particularly Chile, in the mining sector, and we connected them to Australian universities who are hosting postgraduate students from Chile who are doing projects for these Australian companies who are looking to get into Chile. And then it not only was it useful in terms of the work, but then those students returned to Chile and suddenly they had an Australian context and Australian culture and were employable for Australian companies who are operating there. We have over 200 Australian companies with operations in Chile. And actually we've just, in my team, we've just started hosting an policy intern from Melbourne University. So we're starting that journey ourselves. So it's quite good. Now, part of that, though, that work integrated learning is feeds into that the third angle, which you mentioned, which is that learn to learn. So how do you keep that constant learning? That seems like a very big societal shift that we're asking for here. But what are the particular policies we think might improve it?
Yeah, it really is a big shift, and it's something for it's not just something that government can flick a switch and make a difference, but it's something for governments, but it's also something for industry to be thinking about, our education and training system, but individuals themselves. And it's important because career paths and skill needs, they're no longer linear. The pace of change is increasing. We're seeing the introduction of AI and Gen AI, for example. And so we think that labour market entry, upskilling and retraining needs to be supported through policies such as second chance learning, funded micro-credentials. So that's not instead of qualifications, but that's a top-up so that, that people can keep their skills fresh as things change, and also more flexible apprenticeship pathways as well. But we would also say that, where people already have a particular level of education, or if someone's, got existing qualifications, it's important to try and keep those skills up and learn new skills. But also it's important to recognise that there's a lot of people in Australia and in the workplace today that don't have some of the foundational skills that are really, really important to be able to adapt and learn and change. And so surveys that we at AI Group have done over a number of years now show that around, certainly in the last survey, 9 out of 10 employers surveyed said that people within their workplace didn't have they were affected by low levels of literacy and numeracy. And so that, is directly related to a number of productivity measures, but it's also something that will impact an individual's ability to learn and relearn. Mm-hmm. So efforts to raise foundational literacy, numeracy, and digital skills of Australians must be made, so that as a population we're better prepared for the changes that come. We're more resilient, and we've got those learning to learn skills.
And the DBrief podcast is really focused on the challenges for policymakers and industry to tackle the 3 big disruptions on the Australian economy: decarbonisation, digitalisation, diversification, which all the things that you've mentioned so far certainly would support. But also key to meeting that challenge will be an uplift in STEM skills. And I know that you made a specific call out for that in your policy paper. What in detail should we look at there?
So there's a range of different things. STEM skills are incredibly important. It's partly about raising outcomes in a school context. It's about increasing the pipeline into STEM occupations, including vet and higher education teachers, as well as incentivising mid-career skilling as well. And there's some great examples overseas where some of those things have happened. So we think that there's a range of models to be drawing from.
Well, thanks very much, Caroline. I think that's been a good summary. I've certainly learnt a lot, which is handy. So what we'll, after the election, we'll check in again and just see if the new government takes on some of our policies. Thanks very much for your time.
Fantastic. Thanks, Louise. Thanks for your time too.